Hi, this is Alessio Rastani of Leading Trader. Hope you're well. Just a quick update on the Bitcoin market. And of course, in this video, I want to show you a very fascinating signal on Bitcoin that many folks out there are not seeing. So I'm going to show this to you in this video. Now, as you probably remember, in my last video on Bitcoin from a few days ago, I said that I was looking for Bitcoin to eventually head below these lows, below the lows of 3,500, and eventually to head south and take out those lows. And in fact, they've done that now in the last couple of days. Bitcoin went below the lows of a few weeks ago and below 3,500, and they're currently trading about 3,360. And the reason why we were expecting Bitcoin to head lower is because of three reasons. Firstly, as you will see here on this chart, this is my Elliott Wave chart of Bitcoin, and you will see our Elliott Wave indicator, our LT Intelligent Elliott Waves, is showing to us that we're in a likely wave 3. So this entire downward move we're seeing here is part of this wave 3 move in Bitcoin, which of course in Elliott Wave theory, as you can see here, in Elliott Wave theory, wave 3 is usually the most powerful, the most dynamic part of the wave. Which means what? Which means that eventually we're going to get this wave 4 correction. It could be a pretty significant correction, but at the moment we're not there yet. And here's something else I want to show you. If we switch this chart to a weekly time frame, this is where it gets very interesting. So the second thing that we need to pay attention to is the fact that we're not too far away. We're actually getting very close now to the 200 weekly average. That's the green line you see on my chart right there. That 200 weekly average usually gets tested by the markets quite often. And it usually forms as a level of support on the markets. Often markets come down to the 200 weekly average, and they usually bounce from those levels. Of course, markets can also exceed the 200 weekly average as well, but on the whole, they usually test it or indeed bounce from it, and it often acts as a level of support. And that 200 weekly average currently stands at 3,160, the next level of support for Bitcoin. By the way, we're not saying that's the bottom for Bitcoin. We're just saying that's the next likely downside target for Bitcoin, potentially by the end of December or perhaps a bit sooner. But here's something else I want to show you. This is quite interesting. Notice on this weekly time frame, we have a signal that should not be ignored. That's the pulse signal on the weekly charts. So if I just zoom in here, you will see that, as a matter of fact, we are now in the third week, the third bar of this pulse signal that fired to the downside when these red dots turn to blue dots. Now, usually weekly pulses tend to be very strong. And because the average pulse lasts about 8 to 10 bars, or 8 to 10 weeks in this case, we're only in the third bar, the third week of this pulse, which means we could have another 5, perhaps 5 to 7 weeks of potential pulse momentum. And that would take us until the middle of January. Let me show you this. For example, if I just go back on a daily time frame chart, you will see the pulse that fired on the daily time frame here. This pulse that fired on the 14th of November, that lasted about, as you can see here, about 15 bars or 15 days. And that pushed Bitcoin down significantly lower. Let me show you this. If we go on the weekly time frame chart, let me show you this. The pulse that lasted significantly, let me show you this, back in 2016. In 2016, you will notice something very interesting. There was a pulse that fired off here in November, as a matter of fact, November of 2016, right here, as you can see. And this managed to push Bitcoin up significantly higher. It pushed it from about $700 all the way, as you can see here, well, significantly higher. And this pulse lasted about almost 20 bars. So that's quite interesting. But the bottom line is this. Just go back to that pulse that's forming right now on the weekly time frame. So bottom line is this. We're getting closer to the 200 simple moving average on the weekly time frame, and we've got a pulse that's fired to the downside on the weekly time frame as well. Let me make this very clear. We're not saying that Bitcoin is going to continue dropping all the way to the end of January or the middle of January. That's not what we're saying. All we're saying is the momentum on Bitcoin at the moment is going to remain bearish, potentially until the middle of January. And that means between now and January, it could do a lot of things. Bitcoin could, for example, have a bounce. It could have a pullback. It doesn't necessarily have to move in a straight line. For now, all I'm interested in is when Bitcoin eventually tests this 200 weekly average, how is it going to react to it? what is going to be the likely reaction. Will it hold it, or will it actually exceed it and go below it? That's going to be the next important question for Bitcoin. By the way, guys, let me just quickly show you this. As you know, very recently, we released our LT Intelligent Elliott Waves indicator. And in fact, I did a webinar on this. As you may remember, about a couple of weeks ago, I did a webinar on our Elliott Waves indicator. And as you probably remember, a lot of you who registered for this webinar could not attend it because it reached maximum capacity. It was full by the time the webinar was launched, as you can see here from the screenshot. So because many of you emailed me saying, could you please extend the discount a bit longer? I have agreed to extend the discount for the Elliott Waves indicator until this Sunday. All right, guys, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to temporarily extend the discount for our LT Elliott Waves indicator until this Sunday. And the link to go to is leadingtrader.com/wave. All right, guys, thanks very much indeed. I hope this video has helped. And if it has, please give it a thumbs up and also please subscribe for future updates. Thanks a lot.